Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call the October 16th, 2025 meeting of the Santa Cruz City Planning Commission to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Dan?
Here.
Gordon?
Here.
Kelly?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
McKelvey?
Here.
Thompson?
Here.
Chair Paul Hamus.
Here. Are there any statements of disqualification tonight?
Yes. On the first item, but only if it gets pulled, I think.
Matt, disqualification on consent items, how does that work?
That's a good question. Let me check that quick.
Okay.
1 second.
Thanks.
I believe you're just going to refrain from voting on the consent agenda.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay. Oral communications. Oral communications is a time for the public to address the commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda and are within the scope of the Planning Commission's charge. Is there anybody that would like to speak to oral communications here tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes from October 2nd, 2025, and we'll hear a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we just do all in favor? Everyone say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our consent public hearing agenda. We have one item on consent tonight, and that is 1305 East Cliff Drive, which is the Natural History Museum over on East Cliff Drive. Should we hear from the public first? Or, I know, Sam, we've gone back and forth on this so many times. I always forget.
So first, you're going to want to ask if any commissioners would want to pull the item.
Right.
And if nobody
That's
wants
right.
to pull the item, you're going to open the public hearing, and then there'll be a second chance to for any of the commissioners to pull the item.
Right.
And then also, just if the item is pulled, then Commissioner Gordon, you're going to want to recuse yourself.
Okay, would anybody like to pull item number 2? Okay, seeing none, we will open up the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak on 1305 East Cliff Drive? Please, come forward. You shall be heard. If you'd like to, you can sign in. It helps us with our minutes. You do not have to. And we'll have 2 minutes per speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Craig Geringer, live in Seabright neighborhood around the corner from the museum. Lived there about 20 years, we're full-time residents. We like the museum, it's exciting to see some of the plans. Our question is about the park area. So it's not a very big park, it is a public park, and there's a limited amount of grass area today, limited amount of flat grass area. From our review of the plans, it looks like perhaps up to 70% of the relatively flat grassy area might be removed during this building process and with the paths and whatnot. So our question is if there can be more of the flat grassy area saved, and there is a meandering path that kind of takes up a lot of that. There might be some other options, I don't know, we're not the designers of it, but there is a flat access from both ends of the park currently, and there's also, I don't know if it's a multi-story building, I would think that there might be an elevator or some other access to the outside area, which is, I don't know what you call it, it's a cathedral area that's outside and open. There's some redesign on it, so that's our request. I don't know if this works. Is that all I say? I don't have questions or anything?
It's not really a dialogue. It's more just you speak to us. And yeah.
Okay. Because the remaining part, at least as far as we see the plans, is mostly non-grassy area and also at a slope. So and there's not another public grassy area park around that I'm aware of within maybe 8 or 10 or 12 blocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for your service. My name is Dan Hafley, and I strongly support this application. The Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History has been in business for 120 years, as you know, starting with Laura Hecox and her great collection after she retired from the Lighthouse. And that museum has been a mighty place that has done a lot of great environmental education, served a lot of visitors, created a lot of lifetime stewardship, but it's too small. It needs more space to do what they do to accommodate more visitors and more students, and in particular, children and adults with disabilities as well. Having ADA access, I think, is very, very important. Being able to deal with the challenges of having an old building, an old Carnegie Library that's been fixed up a few times, but it's really important to have an asset like this in our community and ensure that it sustains itself into the future. So thank you again for your consideration, and I hope you support this project.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Felicia Van Stolk, the Executive Director at the Santa Cruz Museum, and I would just like to address the comments about the park use in the design. The meandering pathway to the amphitheater is the length that it is and the design that it is. In order to be an ADA accessible pathway, it needs to be that length in order to go down the grade that it is. The other pathways in the park are not ADA accessible because of erosion and root damage, and also some grading issues and the steepness of the slopes throughout the park. The rest of the floor plan for the building expansion impacts garden bed areas behind the building and to the east side. And then the community classroom does impact the square of lawn directly adjacent to the museum, where we currently already hold many of our events. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item? Going once, going twice. Okay, we will return to the commission. Anybody want to pull this one? Okay, then let's have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dan,
Yes.
Borden,
Abstain.
Kelly,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Yes.
McKelvey,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Chair Paul Hamas.
Yes.
I think you have to move the consent item motion.
A little procedural issue. I think we do have to move that one. So do we have a motion?
It would be my honor to make a motion to approve
Okay.
this great project.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all those opposed? Okay, we got to vote twice on that one, so a lot of consent. Okay. Next item on our agenda is the item number 3, the 2025 Local Coastal Program update to add a chapter to the local coastal program called the Beaches and Bluffs Hazard Adaptation Plan. So I think we have a staff presentation.
No, yeah. No, you have a baby. You have interrupted.
Sorry. I should have got that one.
I appreciate wanting to get it.
Oh, wow. Thought they were here for us. All right. Thanks, commissioners and chair. I appreciate it. Matthew Benoit, principal planner for advanced planning. So we're here today to talk about our Beaches and Bluffs chapter for our local coastal program. I'm here joined with Susan Walden, our planner. She and I have been working on this for the last 5.5 years, as well as Tiffany Wise-West, Dr. Tiffany Wise-West, who's our Sustainability and Resiliency Officer. I'll be presenting, but Susan has been with us for a long time as well and has a wealth of knowledge on this. And Tiffany really has a great handle on all the various work we're doing and a much more detail on the coast and that work. So without further ado. All right, guys, so just briefly, I'm gonna touch on like what the local coastal program is. You'll probably hear me say LCP at times. I'll try not to do that too much, but the local coastal program is part of the California Coastal Act, which was adopted in 1976 to ensure public access to the coast and coastal resources and to protect sensitive habitat and sensitive marine and coastal habitats. And under this, the Coastal Act requires that cities adopt a local coastal program to guide development in the coastal zone. And that coastal zone is essentially the high tide mark and then about 3,000 feet or so inland from that. So about a quarter of the city or so is in that zone. It does vary a little bit, and it goes up the river, for instance, a little ways too, but essentially it is like that 3,000 feet along the coast upward. And so our current LCP, and as you can see, it guides development decisions in the coastal zone. It was adopted in 1994 under our previous general plan, 1990 to 2005. And those current policy chapters that we're working with right now are coastal access, recreation and visitor serving uses, marine environment, land resources, development policies, and then we also have a separate land use chapter as well. And we are working currently on updating all of those chapters right now, because again, we want to bring those up into our current general plan as well. We've been working on this work for some time as well, but those chapters are forthcoming. We're bringing this chapter before you first. It's anticipated, I would say that those are probably like later 2027 is when you'll see the whole rest of the LCP package before you. But today we're really focusing on the fact that this 1994 document does not touch upon resiliency, climate change, sea level rise. Really at all, these things weren't talked about 30, 35 years ago. And so it's really important that we add a chapter to our local coastal program that really brings in coastal policies that relate to these really important topics. And also there's been, in the last 10 years or so, significant coastal commission, what's the word for? Guidance, sorry, coastal commission guidance, really having cities, telling cities to start updating their local coastal programs to add these kind of policies, recognizing that, these issues have been around for a long time, but a number of local coastal programs don't have sea level rise and resiliency policies in them. Something that's very important in this growing climate crisis. And the coast is the front line for this climate crisis. And we certainly saw that with all the West Cliff damage in the last couple of years, especially the 2022, 2023 storms. And so with all of this, we've been thinking a lot. There's been a lot of coordination with the Coastal Commission on this, and over time we began to develop what we're calling the Beaches and Bluffs Hazards Adaptation Chapter, which is really the first phase of this work in seeking to balance, the city's development and housing needs with sustainable coastal management. And this work is definitely not happening in a vacuum. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Tiffany and her team are leading a huge variety of resiliency planning efforts along the coast. And so I'll hand it over to Tiffany for a little bit here as well, just for her to give you a little more context on where the local coastal program and our updates sit among all this other coastal work by the city.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Tiffany Wise-West, Sustainability and Resiliency Officer for the city. And what you see before you is really the arc of our coastal resilience planning and policy development over the last about 8 years. All of the work, and I'm not going to go through all of this, I'm just going to use it and speak to a few things, but the dark blue work on the left-hand side primarily, and at the top, is the completed work that has been done, some of it, much of it through grants. A lot of it addressing from the start, 2018, our first sea level rise vulnerability assessment, and then a body of work that we refer to as Resilient Coast Santa Cruz 1.0 that looked at adaptation alternatives for both Westcliff and our beaches. We conducted extensive outreach, developed virtual reality tools, and ultimately adopted a Westcliff Drive adaptation and management plan in 2021 that consisted of about 20 projects to be implemented over the next 10 to 15 years. At the same time, as Matt said, over the last 5+ years, and over the course of 2 Coastal Commission grants, we began developing this Beaches and Bluffs chapter, and you can kind of see where I'm circling right now. The Beaches and Bluffs chapter was funded by 2 different Coastal Commission grants, and it has a complementary piece to it that is referred to in your agenda report under policy BB5. And that complementary piece is this revised working set of triggers and thresholds for coastal management. We are utilizing a working adaptation pathways approach, meaning there's uncertainty as to when these longer term impacts are going to occur. It doesn't make sense for us to say, in this year, we're gonna do this. Instead, we say, when this specific condition happens, we will transition to this next policy. It's considered kind of a smart management tool for coastal work. So a complementary piece coming forward with this LCP Beaches and Bluffs chapter as part of our latest Coastal Commission grant is the documentation, refinement of those triggers and thresholds that will be further refined in the Shoreline Adaptation and Management Plan project that is also referenced in the policies in the Beaches and Bluffs chapter and the agenda report. I also want to point out that in order to implement this triggers and thresholds kind of approach, you need a coastal change monitoring network. And so we've been progressively and incrementally implementing that, including a tidal gauge at the wharf, 3 years of successive drone flights, and lots of communications, for example, with Surfline on utilizing cameras and analytical tools to help us track shoreline change, erosion, beach width, et cetera. The LCP Beaches and Bluffs chapter does call for these shoreline adaptation and management plans. And in fact, we got funding from the Ocean Protection Council and have launched those projects for 3 sub-areas: Westcliff, Mancow Beach, and Seabright Eastcliff. And you'll see on your desk in front of you an invitation to the first set of community meetings for those SAMPS projects. And we encourage you to share those with your networks. We'll be introducing the project to the community and getting some initial feedback. Also for the public, although there's only one person here, there's flyers up front. That project runs to the end of 2026, and one of the outputs of that project is another set of recommended LCP policies for the Beaches and Bluffs chapter, as is specified in the current chapter. So a set of recommendations. The other 2 aims are to demonstrate compliance with SB 272, a recent law that requires demonstration of sea level rise planning to a minimum set of criteria, which we pretty much already meet, but we need to kind of bring it all together in one package. And then the third aim is to develop specific projects for the next 20 to 30 years in these 3 areas. So really will require our community and our elected officials to make some decisions about where are we gonna go, what approaches are we gonna take going forward. With that, you can take a look at this slide afterwards because there's a lot in there, and many of these materials are available on our website. Thank you, Matt, back to you.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. And so, so with that, going back to the Beaches and Bluffs hazard adaptation policy development, again, really want to reiterate a lot of this came out of all that work that Tiffany had just mentioned, resilient coast, things like that. We started to think about how to start to develop these policies, along with, really starting in 2020, starting to work very closely with the Coastal Commission staff, our local Coastal Commission staff here. Really extensive coordination with them throughout these last 5 years, and lots of iteration back and forth, and many changes, some of them large-scale changes to this document over time. And we really got to a good place with them, which is really exciting. As part of that discussion, one key factor that came in this, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit, we had started this work 5-6 years ago, looking at doing the whole LCP update and just updating everything and also adding this chapter in. It became clear, both because of the importance of the Westcliff work and the damage that had happened, and also just how long the process was taking to do the updates. It was decided with the Coastal Commission staff to really break it up into this work into at least 2 phases. And so one of them being this Beaches and Bluff Hazards Adaptation chapter, which was kind of the highest priority item because of the Westcliff work and because of our lack of, the sea level rise and resiliency policies. And then all the other LCP update work, which is probably going to, it's going to be a little less, a little less inventing the wheel on that one. We already have these policies. A lot of them still work, but we just need to bring them up, to our current, general plan alignment. So we really broke these up into 2 phases with them. And then another key aspect of this was, as Tiffany had mentioned, the shoreline adaptation management planning. In our work with the Coastal Commission, there is a number of elements of this resiliency planning along the coast that was really detailed and got into a lot of specifics. And we were wanting to keep the local coastal program a little more general and broad and high level, and keep it functioning as kind of a general plan for the coast, which it typically is. And so this idea of these shoreline adaptation management plans is what allowed us to tell Coastal Commission, really important idea, we want to do this, but it also belongs in a new process with different funding source and new consultants involved on it, and a different level of community engagement. And so we could kind of push some of those details a little bit further out. And we're now at the place where Tiffany's already starting that work now too, so there's a little overlap here, which is really good. But this really, the development of these policies really set the stage for that next process of Tiffany's work. And then certainly a few other things that happened during the course of this work, with the Westcliff damage and the rebuild of that, and a lot of community engagement in that neighborhood around that work. There's the 50-year community vision for Westcliff. That document was produced a few years ago. And then just earlier this year, the Westcliff 5-year roadmap. And so making sure that this policy document aligned with these new, very community-driven and council-driven documents was important as well. So that was additional work that we kind of, worked a lot with the community, and, a lot of city department coordination throughout all these items, but certainly in the last few years, making sure that these documents align properly. And so out of all that policy development, there was several key themes that came out, 6 kind of key goals that you'll see highlighted in the Beaches and Bluffs policies. I don't have them all written out because it's a lot of text, but I'll just read them briefly to you. So keep public beaches and access open and safe, use signs to guide decisions and update hazard maps regularly, avoid or limit new construction in high-risk areas, monitor erosion and coastal changes each year and after storms, prioritize nature-based solutions like beach replenishment or living shorelines over harder engineered approaches, such as concrete seawalls where appropriate. And then again, number 6, as I had mentioned, align with the local hazard mitigation and climate action plan, as well as the Westcliff 50-year vision and the 5-year roadmaps. So I want to highlight just a few key policies. There's 18 total in the document, and these are 6 I'll just mention briefly. One of them being, as Tiffany mentioned, just how important monitoring is in this work going forward, and with the shoreline adaptation management planning. As soon as we get into more specifics and figuring out what these triggers and thresholds are and how they dictate further work, monitoring is a key. Monitoring and collecting data is plays a key role in that. So that was one important policy. Another is the shoreline adaptation management plans, as I had mentioned, and that Ocean Protection Council funding that's allowing that work to be started now. That's a significant policy in this. And then public projects along West Cliff. The key here was there's a lot of work going on in West Cliff right now already, and it was important to have some kind of interim policy that provided some additional policies around that work prior to Tiffany's, the Shoreline Adaptation Management Plan, or SAMP as is often said. There's a West Cliff specific SAMP that will be taking place with her work, but until that SAMP is completed, this is essentially an interim policy to help guide development along West Cliff. And then the policies also created what's called a shoreline hazard evaluation area, which set up new requirements for property within a certain number of feet of the beaches and bluffs. In this case, it's largely 100 feet inland from the bluff edge. And then in certain cases, we've used best available science to determine that it needs to be a little bit further in. So in some cases, the line might be 110 or 20 feet. But for the most part, it's 100 feet inland from the bluff edge. And that map is included as one of the attachments in our packet. I think it's actually below the Beach and the Bluffs document. I think once the whole LCP update is done, that'll be its own separate, figure at the end of the document. But for ease of reviewing sake, it was simpler to drop those in just after the chapter in that one attachment.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Yeah.
there? I feel like I asked this like many meetings ago and it was already answered. And one of the comments mentioned it, but when the line goes through a property, does that mean it's only the portion of the property affected or the whole property that like goes into that zone?
Good question. It is development related. And so I believe if the portion of that development was outside of that line, it wouldn't trigger that.
Mm-hmm.
But if any portion of the new development or any kind of development of that would be within that, then it would trigger that requirement. Essentially, the shoreline hazard evaluation area means like whenever there's development within this area, there's already a number of things you have to do developing in the coastal zone and, potentially need a coastal development permit for. But within this 100-foot zone, you have to do a lot of additional geotechnical hazard research on the site. And so in that case, if a project is outside of that zone, I don't believe it would trigger those requirements because they're really specific to that 100 feet.
Thanks for clarifying, because that would have minimum impact on a parcel, like if it just clipped the corner.
Yep.
Thanks.
And then sorry, yeah.
If you're not, go ahead if you have more. Just curious about how the 100 feet was determined. Whether is it number out of a hat, or is there some science-based reason for that?
I can take that. Sure, I can take that. So this line was actually made from the union of 3 different coastal erosion projection models. Instead of picking just one and then potentially having, objections to, well, why this model and not that model, we merged all the models and then included the 100 feet or make a conservative estimate, quite frankly. Now, the models themselves, they're just models, right? So In some areas, there's certain assumptions where they differ widely. In some cases, they're similar. So the 100-foot buffer then was meant to give us a conservative kind of offset, especially in the areas where maybe it was closer.
What did the three models dictate?
What did they dictate?
What kind of a boundary? Was it the 100 feet? Was it less? Was it more in some places?
It was less and more in some places. And then we made a union of that with the 100-foot offset from the bluff edge. So the models all kind of show similar in some areas, differing in other areas. Because they have different sets of assumptions, they differ, right? They're just models. So it's a union of all of those models and the 100-foot offset from the bluff edge.
And I think, yeah, as Tiffany had mentioned, that 100 feet, you know, even though it is a union and covers a lot of that, 100 feet is probably arbitrary in some places, but that was ultimately also where we landed with our coordination with Coastal Commission on that too. So they may have used that as a best practice in other cities and recommended that to us. Probably a conversation we had a while ago, I can't remember exactly, but I'll check in on that too. There's other reasoning behind that. And then a few other key policies to mention, prioritizing nature-based shoreline protection over hard armoring. And Tiffany's doing a lot of work, some of which you'll see in that Gantt chart there, a lot of nature-based work right now. And then also a number of policies around shoreline protective devices. And really thinking about how, if we're gonna use shoreline protective devices, which are allowed along West Cliff, the Coastal Commission is also looking for some amount of mitigation of the impacts of those too. So they're always looking for a balance as much as possible. They know we're gonna use them in some cases. And the city is, you know, already looking at ways and discussing with Coastal Commission how that might be mitigated elsewhere. And those impacts offset. So this policy really sets the stage for a lot of that work going forward. And then response to public comments. So we'd had a few different public review drafts, one back in 2022. Following that, we received extensive Coastal Commission comments, really went back to the drawing board, changed this substantially. It's a very different document than it was 3 years ago. And so we released it again this summer, substantially much more final draft version for public comment again. And the draft you see in the packet includes the track changes since we received public comments. So there was a few really key public comments that we thought were important to highlight and that did create some changes in the document. The first one being the Save the Waves organization in Santa Cruz had really good feedback for us on how to better incorporate surfing resources and access to surfing, and really highlighting that better in the document. It had been mentioned in several places, but it really wasn't elevated to the level of like this being a World Surfing Reserve and something that's very important to our coastal work. So we added a lot of language around that. And then there was one good catch by the public on when the 5-year roadmap was adopted by council. They had changed some of the language at council, and that language softened a few of the, like just 2 of the sub policies in this. So we did go in and change that a little bit from, you know, prioritize to support, you know, that kind of that level of change, just for better alignment of those council adopted language. And then we'd also heard from Smart Coast California, that it's a statewide organization that really looks at property rights along the coast and is always interested in local coastal planning efforts, and also, you know, managed retreat, things like that they're kind of always concerned about. And their comments had us add a take-in clause, which can help protect private property should a taking need to happen based on, coastal work. And we had looked at other cities, and that's pretty standard language. That's actually included in a lot of LCP work. So it wasn't out of the ordinary to add it to this as well. So that was another good addition. And then most of the other edits you see in there are just kind of smaller Coastal Commission clarification cleanups at this point, because they reviewed it at the same time again as the public in that draft review period. There weren't too many more edits from them because we've been going back and forth with them for 2.5, 5 years. So we've gotten to a good place with them, but yeah, the other minor edits are related to that.
Can I ask a question? So because I didn't read the first draft 3 years ago, could you just highlight maybe just 3 areas where this version differed the most from the previous version? You
Yeah.
don't have to go into long detail, I'm just
Yeah,
going
no,
like a
thanks.
high level.
No, it's a great question. I probably should have even added a little more detail on the staff report on that because it was a big change. I'd say that the very biggest one is the less narrative. Our previous version was much more like our current general plan, where you have a chapter, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of kind of talk and more flowery language. And then you have this list of policies at the end. And I think our first draft of the whole LCP was, what was it, 240 pages. So
Like, what were like the substantive differences?
Okay, so we got rid of a lot of the narrative and streamlined that quite a bit and focused on the policies. The main difference with the policies was that there's also a lot more detail at the policy level too. Prior to this, we had a little bit more broad, more general plan level language. We had heard over and over from Coastal Commission though, like we needed a Westcliff policy, for instance, something that really dived into Westcliff and how it should function now and also function in the future. And so with everything going on in Westcliff, that took a significant amount of time to develop, including aligning with all these other documents that were starting to take shape over the last few years. Another key one is the SAMP idea, this shoreline adaptation management planning, where we start to think more about, okay, Coastal Commission wants a lot more detail. We don't have the time or resources to put it into this document. It makes a lot more sense to tie it to funding that Tiffany had anticipated getting through other projects. So that's where that kind of took place as well.
So it sounds like it was mostly like procedural and narrative differences, not substantive policy changes from the first iteration of the second. Like they didn't, like I guess I was wondering, for instance, like if we had some language about coastal armoring and they were like, no, you got to do something different. And then this version is substantively different with armoring like on a policy level.
No.
So that's not what I'm hearing.
No, goal-wise, I think they follow very similar paths. And yeah, they were trying to get to the same thing, but Coastal Commission staff and the coastal, what they had heard from the Coastal Commission as well, like they just wanted a lot more detail.
Okay.
And so that took a lot of time to go back to the drawing board and coordinate across departments and really figure out what this language can be and coming up with some new policies.
I think I would add that the original 240-page document included revisions and what we hoped would be a full-scale LCP update with the other 5 topic areas.
Yep.
So it's not that we had 240 pages on beaches and bluff hazard adaptation. We had access and visitor serving uses and recreation and marine biology. So some of that work is the base of what we're now continuing to streamline into policy chapters, much like Beaches and Bluffs really has a page or two of descriptive. And the prior document had, where are all the parks in Santa Cruz? I mean, it did a lot of fine trumpeting of the lovely aspects of things that you can do in Santa Cruz, but the Coastal Commission, really, we thought we should get it just down to the nitty gritty.
And so are the SAMPs seen as like the most critical need, or are we really just kind of satisfying the need to go more granular with the Coastal Commission and keep the broader document more broad? Or is it a funding issue? I'm just hearing a lot of different, or is it all the above, really?
It's all of the above, really. It's addressing the next step policies, making the recommendations on the policies. It's essentially also to satisfy or demonstrate compliance with SB 272. That's a big piece to it. And plus, we need to start making some decisions going forward. The Coastal Commission really wants to see beyond 5 years what's going to happen out on our coastline. The other thing I wanted to mention is what took a lot of time was every word in this Beaches and Bluffs chapter, it is chosen for a reason. And there was a lot of back and forth on that between the original draft and now. The word choice is, I'm not a planner, so this was my first time doing something like this, but it took a lot of time and consideration. So that was another piece to it.
And just to follow up on the SAMP idea, I remember seeing something in the chapter about there was kind of a range of coastal retreat, where in some areas it was more closer to 2 inches, other areas it's closer to like almost 6 per year. Are those SAMP areas where we're seeing the most intense coastal retreat? I just didn't see anything specific about that.
The SAMPS areas actually cover all the areas that the city manages in the city. So the only areas it excludes are Natural Bridges, the Mobile Home Park, and UCSC's Coastal Science Campus. So it actually covers all of our coastline.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, and then just really briefly, this is kind of tacked into our report because it's more of a cleanup, but something that also came up in the last year or so that we realized we wanted to address as we were bringing forward an LCP update to the Coastal Commission, and this is mentioned in the staff report as well. We wanted to have our sensitive habitat and vegetation maps updated in the LCP. The current ones that our current planners use for projects that come in, they're still from the 1990 general plan. And it made a lot of sense to have the much newer science of our 2030 general plan be used for those decisions. And within the coastal zone, they can't be until that map is adopted into, as part of the LCP. So this is also just added to the amendment package to satisfy that. And so with that, that's the recommendation, staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Okay. Sorry, Commissioner McKelvey. Oh, I was going to say, does anybody have questions? So, Commissioner McKelvey.
So I understand that these granular policies will be developed later, but I do have concerns about what impacts are going to occur on, the policies, investigations, additional geological reports, et cetera. Can you tell us exactly what is under consideration for those types of investigation?
So we're really talking about just that 100 feet from the bluff edge. So
But
likely
it's
just the one line of properties along the West Cliff, for instance, a little further. But what we're looking for there is to show that whatever is being built there, development, as the Coastal Commission defines it, that development can last there in the given lifetime of that project.
Understood.
And that it doesn't, would waive your right to being able to use like a seawall to protect it.
Understood.
And that's really all it's getting at.
Well, except that, is there any way that you can articulate the kinds of investigations you're considering or have already adopted, or what those requirements might be for one of the homeowners out there?
I think it largely has to do with like slope stability analysis. I think that's a key one. Essentially be like, geotechnical report of some kind would be the main way of looking at that. I think with the policies get into mentioning something called like factor of safety, which is a geotechnical term for determining that stability in that analysis. But if there are other ways to show that that development can be okay geotechnically, the language in the policy does keep that open for other ways of showing that.
And who does that assessment? Is it professional staff in planning, or is it a peer review by another geotechnical engineer, or how is that
Yeah,
proposed?
it would be an engineer.
It's a licensed engineer that the homeowner would
Right.
engage.
Yeah.
They would have a report done. I'm asking who would review it for the city, for adequacy, for, to meet the policy objectives.
Yeah, that would be done through building, our building department.
I'm sorry. I'm asking, for instance, when someone submits a minor land division, you have a surveyor that draws up the map. And then the city hires a surveyor often to review that map. It's done, third party, not someone within the city departments. Is that something similar that you would be considering, or is that undetermined at this point?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, our building department has some level of geotechnical ability with these documents. And then also the Coastal Commission certainly does too. And when we're talking about these projects that are within 100 feet of the coastline, those are going to be going to the Coastal Commission. And so, I'd have to do a little more research on how that's handled on the city side. But ultimately, it's going to the Coastal Commission.
Just to
They
be
certainly do.
just to be clear about a question that was asked earlier, is it indeterminate at this point whether if one part of a parcel falls in the 100 feet that it applies to the whole parcel, or is that decided?
I will triple check with Coastal Commission on that one, but I'm confident that it's only development within that line.
Okay.
I also had a question. Thanks. So with the triggers and thresholds, my understanding is there's a separate policy that would kind of direct what would occur with this policy. Is that my understanding? Or is there a separate trigger threshold and thresholds for this particular policy?
You mean this policy document?
Yes.
No, the triggers and thresholds are not specified in this policy document. The current policy specifies refinement of the working set of triggers and thresholds that we already have that then will be fully defined and codified through the SAMS project. It will also, through the SAMS project, recommendations that pertain to triggers and thresholds and monitoring will then be brought into the LCP Beaches and Bluffs chapter in a subsequent amendment, which we have committed to do within 5 years of completing the SAMS project.
Okay, so for this particular, policy would go into effect before that triggers and thresholds would be put into place, is that correct?
Yes, but the policy indicates that the triggers and thresholds approach should be developed through the SAMS project.
I see, okay.
Or further developed and codified.
I see, and rather than having it for each policy have its own triggers and thresholds.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mine is just more of a comment, and I think it's in alignment with Commissioner McKelvey's questions based on our industry that we're in. And so I think I would, my only concern, obviously I have the same concerns as we all do about our shoreline, but I also know that like in the county, for instance, where there have been challenges with geotechnical issues with rebuilding after the CZU fire. Like, I know that's been a real pain point for property owners. And I'm going to keep it high level, but I would just say that as we're refining this, some of the questions that Commissioner McKelvey's asking that takes away some of the gray area that will really feel clear and fair, I guess, to property owners in that process so that we can, just make sure that we're being considerate to the private property owners in that process. And so I would just encourage, I know sometimes the city and the county don't always talk about some of the granular things that are happening on that level, but I do know that it's been a real pain point for property owners because there's been this identification of this vulnerability, which is real in the mountains, but it also has kind of thrown this big blanket across a bunch of properties that have made it difficult for other property owners, so that's all.
Since I brought this up, and then I've heard some really good points from other commissioners, 1994 is when I graduated from high school, so, my question is, does having this better defined now, it seems like maybe it actually helps to have this update? What do you think? Like, if I own a Westcliff property, it's now clear where that line is and all that stuff. Is that an improvement from the old version?
It defines a new requirement, which is to complete the geologic hazard survey, but it does give you more confidence in that what you're building is going to sustain the lifetime of the building itself.
Thank you, that's a very fair answer.
And I just wanted to clarify, I think it's really important that this is policy. I just think it's more about how that property owner goes about getting that clarity and then answers back from the city that help them determine what's possible. So it's more just like how everybody works together to get to that place. And I think that that's part of the pain that I've been hearing in some of these other more geologically sensitive areas.
Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but the policies themselves, there will be guidance to staff on how to actually implement the policies in this kind of specific case, right? So while the policy itself does not need to include that detail, you're raising good points that need to be defined in an implementation kind of guidance.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. That is a really good point. We have the local coastal program, LCP, which again, kind of think of it as like the general plan. And then we have the LCP implementation plan, LCP IP, as you might hear sometimes. And that's essentially the LCP policies reflected in CE code. So we have a number of zoning codes that are part of the LCP, essentially. And so for this instance, this is one case where we're going to have to be developing zoning code for this specific policy, which is we have not done yet. So there will be another bite at the apple here on specifying this work too. I think currently right now it's really just governed by setback requirements. And then I think when stuff does go to, and those setback requirements are also very conservative. And then when this does go to Coastal Commission, right now there's not, they can function fairly subjectively, and there's a lot of times where they might require this work anyway, and they just can right now, even if it's not in our LCP or not. So this kind of more clearly defines the process for us and for them.
And if I may, there's a kind of a movement a little bit in the response to sea level rise at the Coastal Commission that Tiffany can probably speak a little bit more to, about trying to look at some neighborhood level response or some discussion so that it's not property by property by property. You're putting in an addition, and does this 50 feet of seawall need to be, that kind of thing. And so as the SAMP discussion proceeds, there's maybe some more movement at the state level about addressing that. So, the group of buildings around the Seabright Beach, or the group of buildings, just inland of Westcliff Drive, have similar needs, and shouldn't, to your point, each individual situation have to be wrestling with that question. And so, a process that lets the city be involved over the next couple of years to kind of get some handle on at least these 3 SAMP areas, as we're calling them, to maybe make it even clearer or make some decisions ahead of time so that maybe that analysis gets done for a section of buildings, kind of win-win for everybody. I mean, it may put a time frame of future usability on something, but at least you'd be set for that time frame.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're doing these 3 different areas, is because they're different. Westcliff is bluffs, Mancow Beach are beaches. Seabright, Eastcliff, it's kind of a combination of state parks ownership of the beach. We own the bluff, there's a road. So as Susan said, they each kind of have to be developed on their own, but they also need to work together, which is why they're being done at the same time. And to Susan's point, the state really is moving towards this more neighborhood-based approach.
So I have a question about the the timeline of the planning studies that are being done. And you've mentioned a kind of a 5-year perspective, horizon for the work. And I suspect that there is work that looks further into the future, and I'm thinking particularly of the Coastal Commission. Does the Coastal Commission have a horizon for their way of thinking about this that is beyond 5 years? Do they? I'd be interested in knowing kind of how far out they're trying to project for change.
Yes, absolutely. So first, just to clarify, this 2-year project to develop these SAMPs is looking out 20 to 30 years, which
Sorry?
is looking out 20 to 30 years,
20, 30
which we consider medium term. However, one of the criteria of SB 272 for which this planning is satisfying actually requires that we look out to year 2150. Now, obviously, the models don't go that far out. It's impossible to really plan that far, but we have to give an indication of what are the options beyond the medium term. What do the models say erosion, coastal storm flooding, sea level rise might look like, and how do those options respond to that? And then qualitatively, we can address the 2150 question. Our planning already goes to 2100. We already have done that. We've consulted with the Coastal Commission and the Ocean Protection Council on that additional 50 years. And they've indicated addressing that in a qualitative kind of way will suffice. And so it's not a big jump for us to go to 2150. So obviously in the near term, more specific, what we're going to do. Further out, what are the options before us that respond to the projections for those different hazards?
And how will that change or how will that inform the work that you folks are doing? What I'm trying to get my arms around is just looking out at this longer perspective. How does that inform how you think through the kinds of things that are maybe in a 20-year horizon as opposed to 50-year horizon or 75-year horizon?
Sure, so that's where some of that triggers and thresholds work comes out, right? We're gonna ask our community and the city council to make some decisions on what's gonna happen in the next 20 to 30 years. And then we're gonna lay out some options that have triggers and thresholds. For example, we can move back in some areas or we can put seawalls in. What kind of triggers and thresholds need to happen? What do we need to see that would signal, okay, we're gonna go to one of those things? And I think it's really important to remember that with this planning, it's iterative in nature. We're gonna be coming back probably every 10 years with a revision, with the new science, ground truthing it on what we've already experienced, bringing in new regulation, and what our community wants, which may change, or what our elected officials, wanna see. So it's really iterative, but we do have to lay the options out for the Coastal Commission.
Okay, that's, it comes to mind, just a few weeks ago, I went to Seabright Beach for the first time in literally decades, but when I moved to Santa Cruz 52 years ago, there wasn't a beach in Seabright. They had just built the breakwater for the harbor, but there was about 10 feet of beach in Seabright. And now it extends out to the end of the levee. It's, 100, 200 feet wide. So that change over just the time that I've lived in Santa Cruz was shocking to me, and it made me think about, timelines, 5-year timelines aren't very interesting. 50-year timelines are substantial. And I can't imagine how the Westcliff area, without the imposition of something as dramatic as a breakwater, is going to survive the pounding of the ocean. So is anyone imagining big kinds of impositions of changes to the coast that would have an equivalent kind of impact in terms of what the coast looks like? Because Seabright Beach is not recognizable in the period of time that I've lived here.
Sure. So right now, really, all options are on the table for the long term. And we have just completed a nature-based solutions, living shorelines and sand management feasibility study, where we found that Seabright Beach continues to accrete sand largely because of the dunes. The sand accretion has actually stabilized because of the jetty, and the dunes are now causing more buildup of sand there due to the sand transport down coast. Our nature-based solutions study also looked at an artificial reef off the wharf, the technical feasibility of an artificial reef. It found that under different scenarios, the reef could knock down 50 to 90% of wave energy before it hit the wharf. We also looked at an intertidal reef off Mitchell's Cove. However, big impositions, as you said, right now are very difficult to do in the marine sanctuary. In fact, there is no permitting pathway right now to do so. And there's rulemaking going on at the state level on these types of big imposing structures that are in the water. Right now in California, those types of structures can only be utilized if you are restoring ecosystems and the secondary benefit of shoreline protection. Now, there is rulemaking that might change. And in our coastline, we have very healthy kelp. And so the only area where we don't have kelp, which could be a restoration opportunity, is in front of the wharf. So at any rate, we are looking at some of these things. And in other areas in Southern California where they're not in a marine sanctuary, which is more limiting, it's taken like 3 studies, 3 modeling exercises before they've gotten to design of these types of structures. So we've started looking at that. Of course, we also have to look at the impact on recreation resources and surfing. That's a huge deal, right? Even in front of the wharf, the refraction of an artificial reef could damage the wave quality there. So that's something we'll have to consider in a next step study. But right now, all things are on the table.
That's,
Could talk for a long time about this, obviously.
sorry I brought it up.
No, I'm happy to.
Tiffany has way more details on this than I do, but just to provide even a little more context on your question.
Thank you.
This is actually something we heard from Coastal Commission staff as well when we started to do this work 2.0. They wanted to know, and after the Westcliff damage happened, they asked us, we want to know what Westcliff looks like in 50 years. And, we talked a lot about that, internally, but at the end of the day, it was like, we really don't know. All we can do is have a bigger community process and talk to some experts and figure out if this happens, then we'll do X, Y, and Z. And that's where Tiffany's triggers and thresholds and monitoring plays a huge role in what Westcliff will look like.
Thanks. That's really what I was fishing for, was that kind of understanding of what people were thinking about out a further distance. So thank you.
just make a comment and then maybe try to move the item, but I just want to thank all of you for your work on this. This is like some of the most critically important work for our city. And I would just say that in the past 5 years, I've seen more changes on Westcliff than I have in the last 30 years. So it's like climate change impacts are happening in like real time. It's kind of fascinating. It's kind of frightening. There's one section of Westcliff that I've been photographing for like over a year and a half. And it's like, I could do one of those movies where like you watch it, like the rocks like fall, yeah, flip book. It's shocking, but I just am so appreciative that this work is happening. It's like cutting edge stuff. I love the focus on nature-based solutions. I think that's really where we have to go, or else we're gonna have an entire Westcliff that's a seawall. And frankly, that's just not very beautiful and it's not natural. So I know that we do need seawalls and riprap, you know, where we have to have them, and to protect public resources. It's so important. We did that at Twin Lakes Beach, but it's really not where the state of California wants to go as far as protecting our coast. So really like hats off for all of the cutting edge work that you're doing. And so when others are ready, I'm ready to move the item.
Yeah, Pete?
I'm ready as well. I just have two quick comments. I was at a conference this week and someone said, because we can't predict the future is why you have to generate these computer models, because it's better than nothing. And that really struck me, you know, in terms of like averaging out 3 models, because a lot of times I'm like, how do we know that's right? And the point is we don't know it's right, but it's way better to evaluate risk against some sort of science than like a blank box. So I just wanted to say that. I'm a little grouchy about that hotly contested paragraph with the prioritize, explore, consider. So I'm not asking for any changes because I don't want to send you back to the Coastal Commission for God knows how long, but I just wanted to vent that I wish there was more of an emphasis on bicycles in particular and kind of like alternative transportation. And also acknowledging that the public was extremely clear that like autos are very important there. So that's the last I want to say about it, but just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, I'd also just like to say thank you. You know, I feel like lately it's been very evident that many of the things that are happening around climate change are happening quicker than anticipated and are more invasive than anticipated. And I think that the time to move is now. The time to move was yesterday, but the time, now that we're here, the time to move is now. And there are challenges and mistakes will probably be made, but forward momentum, I think, is the most important thing. And I think that's what this represents. So I just wanted to thank all of you for your 6, 7, 8, however long you've been working on this. Seems like a long time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And, oh, sorry.
Just one more thing. Obviously, thank you. This is years in the making, and these things just become your life, and I appreciate your efforts. As for the more granular requirements, regulations, et cetera, Matt, that you're talking about will come back, will they necessarily be this goes to planning to the council now. If they say, yes, this is what we want, will the policies that are developed, will they be narrowed by that, or is it a broad set of responses and policies that we can come up with that that will come back for review? Or how much of another opportunity will we get to help shape those policies?
The policies themselves wouldn't change. They would be, if Coastal Commission adopts them, they would be our LCP policies.
Right.
But what would come back is whatever zoning code amendments that need to be made to implement those policies. In which case, we would seek for them just to be a reflection of the policy and not change the scope in any way of that policy. There's not too many cases in this document. There's going to be more in the other chapters. But in this document in particular, if you see an area where it seems like, oh, there really needs to be specific objective standard, for instance, like around this, that'd be where we would, highlight that detail in an amendment.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to note too, prior to a motion, opening for public comment.
Oh, right.
If
there's no further
someone
questions.
so chooses.
Any further questions? Okay, then we will open the public comment period. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to this item here tonight? Okay, we will close the public comment period, and we will entertain a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Oh, you got it.
All right, I'll
You beat me to it. So, motion by Vice Chair Dan and seconded by Commissioner Kelly. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Dan,
Yes.
Gordon,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
McKelvey,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Chair Paul Hamas.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Okay, we are on to informational items, and Commissioner Kennedy had an informational item.
Matt, did you get an email with those pictures on it? Sweet. So this is going to take 3 minutes, you guys. Thank you at the end of the night. This week I was at a conference of the California Association of Building Energy Modelers. These folks in this room set the policy for our energy code, which has been like awesome and kind of a disaster, as the architects know. Next slide, please. It was super inspiring. I mean, California's grid is amazing with our solar production, with our batteries. Best predictions are we'll have a completely renewable grid 100% of the time in 10 years or so, which is super cool. Next slide, please. This is Professor Mark Jacobson, who put all this information together. Super inspirational. Next one. And this is just for fun. On the right is the head of the Energy Commission, and on the left is his mom, who's 85 and just wrote a book. So they had a great panel. You can call me and I'll tell you more about that if you'd like. But it's just super fun to see them. So here's the thing I wanted to bring to this commission based on our work on housing and our success in building housing. The next energy code is not happening. It's been put on hold by AB 130 because it made things so damned expensive and so damned complicated. And here I am wanting to save the world for my kids and rah, rah, rah. And I'm sitting there thinking, goddamn good thing that we're stopping this code because it's been way too much. There's more details that only applies to residential, but good thing. You all remember the 92 codes, right? Were in effect for what? 15 years, 12 years? You'd have to remind me, but it's not the end of the world to like just freeze a code for a bit. So this last slide, and this is the end of my quick story, is on the right is if you printed out the energy code, that's how many books it is. One of the revolutionary things they're doing is reorganizing the code so that, let's say you're a plumbing engineer, you don't have to look through the entire code to find your work scattered through all these sections. It's now like in a plumbing section. So I'm not going to read those, but those are the comments from the building officials and the building community. Ever increasing complexity, you need a paradigm shift. So I'm bringing good news. The Energy Commission is listening, and I just wanted to share that quick informational item. Tiffany, we'll talk later about some ways to keep our REACH codes going if we would like to.
We're already working on it.
Yep.
We have another REACH code coming to council on the 28th.
Excellent.
We've evaluated the exceptions that are in AB 130, so we're clear on our path.
Excellent. Well, it was just really fun. I wanted to bring that little quick story to everybody.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Any information items from staff?
Yes, really briefly, either December 4th, potentially December 18th, will be our next meeting. We'll keep you posted on that. Our team is working on a few amendments around our housing element objectives and seeking to get those through at least this commission before the end of the year. So we'll keep you posted. Shooting for the 4th, but might need a little more time.
Okay, great. I'm still looking forward to your housing dashboard summary that
Oh, yeah,
I think
it's
it's
a
been a while. I
yearly
think it's been
update,
almost a
doesn't it?
year, right? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Any subcommittee or advisory body oral reports? Don't think so. No items referred to a future agenda. So we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, guys.